Making headlines for this week of February 17th. Media gets trumped. U.S. President speaks fairly and firmly to media cabal in calling out their agenda. Tarnished image. Glory days for Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau may be fading as people see him with more charm than substance. Greece under fire. Financial pressures build again. No more austerity, and country was never expected to recover to pay debts. And science and consciousness, a quantum and spiritual entanglement relating to mind and matter.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. Whether one likes him or hates him, it appears that President Trump has now publicly exposed, perhaps more so than during his campaign, the mainstream media, and may also be operating behind the scenes to help crash the pedophilia network, at least in the U.S., if not exposing the global network. I have to keep emphasizing that we still have no idea what is happening in the background to things we are now seeing publicly. We do not know completely why President Trump is making some of the choices he is making. Choices that appear good, choices that appear bad. We do not know, and this is why I have gone on the record as saying that I refuse to pass judgment on Trump until a reasonable period of time has passed, so we can get a better idea of what his agenda may or may not be. People are upset with him because he has claimed to support the Dakota Pipeline project, for example. Let's look at this example for just a moment. The global cabal is a vast network that has tentacles in almost every facet of our global society. Let us assume for just a moment that Trump may be trying to take down this global cabal. If we accept this, then it makes sense to pick your battles wisely. A good military strategist will not take on so many battles that the forces are too weak. You pick the first battles, focus the strengths on these, win those battles, and then move on. Trump may have indicated his support for the pipeline in order to calm down certain parts of the cabal, namely big oil, that could fight him with lots of resources. This would weaken his battles in other areas. Trump recognizes that the mainstream media has been an enemy, and he also recognizes that he needs the media if he is to win in the eyes of the public. In this sense, he has chosen a battle, and perhaps he may have to say certain things temporarily in order to lessen the resistance from other areas for now. I am not saying that this is the case, but I am saying that this is my justification for why we all need to give him some time to act and to find out where his heart is and what his agenda really is. It makes absolutely no sense to hate Trump only because he has stated his support for the pipeline, for example. Anyone choosing to hate him and discredit him for this one singular statement without making any attempt to understand the larger situation facing him is doing a disservice to themselves and to the people, in my personal opinion. Turning to the media, however, in a recent press conference on February 16th, Trump went to great lengths to affirm support for the media as long as they do their jobs fairly and honorably. As you will hear, his tone was very conciliatory and positive, and he said he would support any media that did a bad story about him if the story was true. Here are a few highlights.
There has been a tremendous surge of optimism in the business world, which is, to me, means something much different than it used to. It used to mean, oh, that's good. Now it means that's good for jobs. Very different. Plants and factories are already starting to move back into the United States, and big league, Ford, General Motors, so many of them. I'm making this presentation directly to the American people with the media present, which is an honor to have you this morning, because many of our nation's reporters and folks will not tell you the truth. and will not treat the wonderful people of our country with the respect that they deserve. And I hope going forward we can be a little bit different and maybe get along a little bit better if that's possible. Maybe it's not, and that's okay too. Unfortunately, much of the media in Washington, D.C., along with New York, Los Angeles in particular, speaks not for the people, but for the special interests and for those profiting off a very, very obviously broken system. The press has become so dishonest that if we don't talk about it, we are doing a tremendous disservice to the American people. Tremendous disservice. We have to talk about it to find out what's going on, because the press honestly is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out of control. But we're not going to let it happen, because I'm here again to take my message straight to the people. As you know, our administration inherited many problems across government and across the economy. To be honest, I inherited a mess at home and abroad. A mess. Jobs are pouring out of the country. Mass instability overseas, no matter where you look. The Middle East, a disaster. North Korea, we'll take care of it, folks. We're going to take care of it all. I just want to let you know, I inherited a mess. Beginning on day one, our administration went to work to tackle these challenges. On foreign affairs, we've already begun enormously productive talks with many foreign leaders, much of it you've covered. Really, really productive conversations. I would say far more productive than you would understand. The media is trying to attack our administration because they know we are following through on pledges that we made, and they're not happy about it for whatever reason. Well, the leaks are real. You're the one that wrote about them and reported them. I mean, the leaks are real. You know what they said. You saw it. And the leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake because so much of the news is fake. So one thing that I felt it was very important to do, and I hope we can correct it, because there's nobody I have more respect for, well, maybe a little bit, but than good reporters. It's very important to me, and especially in this position. It's very important. I don't mind bad stories. I can handle a bad story better than anybody, as long as it's true. And, you know, over a course of time, I'll make mistakes and you'll write badly, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay when it is fake. I mean, I watch CNN, it's so much anger and hatred.
If I may follow up on that, just something that Jonathan Carl was asking you about. You said that the leaks are real, but the news is fake. I guess I don't understand. It seems that there's a disconnect there. If the information coming from those leaks is real, then how can the stories be
fake?
The
reporting is fake. The public isn't, you know, they read newspapers, they see television, they watch. They don't know if it's true or false because they're not involved. I'm involved. I've been involved with this stuff all my life, but I'm involved. So I know when you're telling the truth or when you're not. I just see many, many untruthful things. And I'll tell you what else I see. I see tone. You know the word tone. The tone is such hatred. I'm really not a bad person, by the way. I watched this morning a couple of the network, and I have to say, Fox and Friends in the morning, they're very honorable people. Not because they're good, because they hit me also when I do something wrong, but they have the most honest morning show. That's all I can say. It's the most honest. But the tone, Jim, if you look, the hatred, I think you would do much better by being different. But you just take a look. Take a look at some of your shows in the morning and the evening. If a guest comes out and says something positive about me, it's brutal. Now, they'll take this news conference. I'm actually having a very good time, okay? But they'll take this news conference. Don't forget, that's the way I won. Remember, I used to give you a news conference every time I made a speech, which was like every day. Okay? No, that's how I won. I won with news conference and probably speeches. I certainly didn't win by people listening to you people, that's for sure. But I'm having a good time. Tomorrow they will say, Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people.
Aren't you concerned, sir, that you are undermining the people's faith in the First Amendment, freedom of the press in this country, when you call stories you don't like fake news? Why not just say it's a story I don't like?
I do that.
Call it fake news.
No,
You're undermining confidence in our news media.
Here's the thing.
Isn't
okay,
that important?
I understand what and you're right about that, except this. See, I know when I should get good and when I should get bad. And sometimes I'll say, wow, that's going to be a great story. And I'll get killed. But I know what's good. I know what's bad. And when they change it and make it really bad, something that should be positive, sometimes something that should be very positive, they'll make okay. They'll even make it negative. So I understand it. So, because I'm there, I know what was said, I know who's saying it, I'm there. So it's very important to me. Look, I want to see an honest press. When I started off today by saying that it's so important to the public to get an honest press. The public doesn't believe you people anymore. Now, maybe I had something to do with that. I don't know. But they don't believe you. If you were straight, I would be your biggest booster. I would be your biggest fan in the world, including bad stories about me. But if you go, as an example, your CNN, I mean, it's story after story after story is bad. I won. And the other thing, chaos. There's zero chaos. We are running, this is a fine-tuned machine. And Reince happens to be doing a good job, but half of his job, he's working so hard just putting out fires that are fake fires. I mean, they're fake. They're not true. And isn't that a shame? Because he'd rather be working on health care. He'd rather be working on tax reform, Jim. I mean that. I would be your biggest fan in the world if you treated me right. But you've got to be at least a little bit fair. And that's why the public sees it. They see it. They see it's not fair. You take a look at some of your shows, and you see the bias and the hatred. And the public is smart. They understand it. Just so you understand it, we had a totally divided country for 8 years, and long before that, in all fairness to President Obama, long before President Obama, we have had a very divided. I didn't come along and divide this country. This country was seriously divided before I got here. We're going to work on it very hard. One of the questions I was asked, I thought was a very good question, was about the inner cities. I mean, that's part of it. But we're going to work on education. We're going to work on we're going to try and stop the crime. We have great law enforcement officials. We're going to try and stop crime. We're not going to try and stop. We're going to stop crime. But it's very important to me. But this isn't Donald Trump that divided a nation. We went 8 years with President Obama, and we went many years before President Obama. We lived in a divided nation. And I am going to try. I will do everything within my power to fix that.
As it turned out, it appears Trump was correct. The next day, some of the following headlines appeared. Why Trump wants you to hate the media, from CNN. Trump attacks media in lengthy combative press conference, also from CNN. This follows other CNN headlines in the past. Donald Trump's sleaze attack on reporter hits new level of media animosity, from CNN in May of 2016. Trump launches all-out attack on the press, from CNN in June of 2016. From several other media, Trump attacks on media comes straight from the gut, from Philly.com. Trump attacks media during lengthy press conference, from MarketWatch. Trump's media attacks raise eyebrows even at Fox News, from the Washington Post. Even a Fox News network, KDVR in Denver, had a headline, Trump attacks media in lengthy, wide-ranging news conference. Chuck Todd of MSNBC tweeted the following message on February 17th. This is not a laughing matter. I'm sorry, delegitimizing the press is un-American. Todd was quoted in an article appearing on the legalinsurrection.com website on February 17th. This article also referred to Trump as lashing out against reporters over questions concerning Russia, and used the term confrontations when addressing interactions between CNN and the BBC. As you heard from the press conference, there was none of that at all, and it can be seen how unfair and biased the mainstream media is acting. The Legal Insurrection website wrote the following. Isn't it interesting how the media is allowed to bash Trump and members of his team on a daily basis, but when he pushes back at them, it's a crisis. In listening to the conference, I did not perceive an attack at all. What I did get was that he was putting the media in its place and calling a spade a spade. The media are not used to being put in their place, and this is a very uncomfortable position for them to be in. What the mainstream media does not have the courage to admit is that truth is relative, and the mainstream media is attempting to claim that their perspective and interpretation is the truth while attempting to delegitimize a sitting president. As the article noted, the media delegitimized itself long before Trump became president. Here at CVN, I have no issue telling listeners to not accept what I share as truth, because what is true for you will not necessarily be true for me and vice versa. This is why I offer the links in the show summary, so that each of you can go and check the stories I used for the newscast, and you can determine for yourselves whether or not I am making a fair interpretation. I emphasize the words fair interpretation, and I did not say truthful interpretation. Every perspective, regardless from whom it comes, has a natural bias in it, because every individual has been socialized and conditioned to have a worldview from uniquely different and equally beautiful filters. In this sense, it is important to hear the actual words and then begin to see the responses to those words and discern for yourselves who is demonstrating the higher moral ground, President Trump or the mainstream media, at least in this particular circumstance. In the show summary, I'll include a more humorous video about what is happening when one watches the mainstream media, a link to a story how the Australian Prime Minister helped expose fake news on Trump, and another link reporting on the expulsion of CNN from Venezuela, having been accused of reporting fake news in that country. In other geopolitical news, while much of the world continues to be enchanted by the charm of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, I, speaking as one who was born in Canada, has to say that I am not yet impressed. He talks a good talk, and it is clear that he is able to charm the women of the world, including Ivanka Trump and others. On February 18th, RT reported that Trudeau was speaking to a group at an elite banquet in Hamburg, Germany. RT reported that Trudeau told an elite audience in Hamburg that it is time to get real about rising inequality, which is causing anger among the middle class, urging businesses to pay your taxes and pay a living wage. Speaking at an annual banquet in Germany, Trudeau warned guests at the exclusive black tie gala that rising inequality led to an us versus them situation, with people distrusting their governments and employers. The article quoted Trudeau as saying the following: "When companies post record profits on the backs of workers, consistently refused full-time work and the job security that comes with it, people get defeated. When governments serve special interests instead of the citizens who elected them, people lose faith. We're watching that anxiety transform into anger on an almost daily basis. It's time to pay a living wage, to pay your taxes, and to give your workers the benefits and peace of mind that come with stable full-time contracts." The article did also note, however, that Trudeau himself saw the paradox in his remarks, admitting he understood the irony of preaching about the struggles of the middle class to a sea of tuxedos and ball gowns while wearing a bow tie himself. It is indeed an ironic speech, considering the state that Canada is really in, and not the state that the government and the media would like the world to know. An article by Susan Delacourt, appearing on the ipolitics.ca website on February 14th, reported that a new international trust index released today contained some troubling news for the Prime Minister and his Liberal brand. Canadians' trust in government has eroded profoundly since Trudeau took power 15 months ago. Edelman, the public relations firm that compiles the annual index, has put Canada into the distruster nation category for the first time in the 17-year history of the global survey. Distrusters are nations in which most people express distrust in their civic institutions. Edelman executives were using words like remarkable and dramatic at the launch of the 2017 Trust Index's results in Toronto on Tuesday morning. They were also warning that Canada is assembling all the ingredients for the kind of populist eruption that overturned the establishment order in the United States and Britain last year. The evidence? According to the index, 1 in 2 Canadians fears that newcomers to the country are damaging our economy and national culture. A full 80% agreed that elites were out of touch with regular people, and 40% agreed that they were being unfairly denied access to the education and opportunities they needed to get ahead. Nearly 2/3 of respondents, 61%, said they didn't have confidence in the country's leaders to address the challenges facing the nation. Now, like Sweden, Canada has been embracing the cabal-created refugee crisis by welcoming in alleged refugees that very likely also include Daesh militants, trained and paid for by the US, Israel, and perhaps other allies. Sweden is currently on the edge of a violent revolt, and numerous areas around the country have been declared no-go zones due to the violence that has been breaking out. And even a national electrical maintenance company has moved out of multicultural Malmö in southern Sweden, citing the risks and dangers of violent outbreaks. Like Sweden, Canada has been giving financial incentives and perks that are significantly more than what most Canadians earn, and this tends to upset those who have lived in those countries their entire lives and struggled to just get by. It is a situation that could turn Sweden into a civil war zone. Coming back to Delacourte's article, she also shares that Trump isn't Trudeau's real problem. What threatens Trudeau's government is the populist discontent that brought Trump to power. These new numbers confirm that Canada isn't isolated from trends seen south of the border. But it's the speed of the downturn that's especially remarkable. Trust in government has slipped from 53% to 43% since last year's index. Trust in the media has similarly plummeted from 55% last year to 45% this year. Lisa Kimmel, the CEO of the Edelman Group that conducted the survey, submitted an article to the Globe and Mail on February 14th, and she offers this. Canada needs a new model of trust to counter populist measures. Canada needs to confront its challenges head-on with an appreciation for the fundamental shift that has occurred in influence from elites to populist power, with a focus on a new model where institutions work with people to influence outcomes. The job of minding the gap between success and growing discontent is a job we all need to commit to with urgency. Margaret Wente of the Globe and Mail wrote in January that Justin Trudeau's out of touch with the 99%. Trudeau has been in power now long enough to see that he is not making the best choices that support the general population. He has already broken numerous promises, including what some say was the big promise that got him elected, to eliminate Canada's first-past-the-post election system to one of proportional representation. The news also does not look good for Trudeau, according to an online poll on the debatepost.com website. The poll, which was started in mid-July of 2016, asked the question, as it stands now, would you vote Liberal in 2019? According to the results page, as of February 18th, 20,285 votes had been cast, and over 19,000 of those votes stated that those people would not support Trudeau. Only slightly more than 1,000 said they would vote Liberal. Trudeau may have the charm, but in terms of addressing the corruption in the media and perhaps other institutions, one might say that he has been trumped. And if Trudeau is not careful, Canada could well become another destabilized country by the global cabal. It is for this reason that Canadians will have to become more informed on so many of the issues that have led to their enslavement without their informed democratic consent. Although other positive changes may ultimately prevent Canada from falling apart, it is important to at least be aware of what is happening so that necessary steps can be taken to push for changes as peacefully as possible. It appears that the Nato Alliance has suffered another blow, although this is news that most likely will not end up on any Western media headlines. Sputnik News has reported on February 18th that residents of 4 NATO member states would prefer a military alliance with Russia if their countries were attacked. This is evidenced by results of a global survey conducted among residents of 66 countries by sociologists from the WIN Gallup International. The article added that Russia was chosen by residents of Bulgaria, Greece, Slovenia, and Turkey as the main guarantor of their security. In case of an attack, all these countries want to see Russian forces fighting on their side, the survey revealed. According to the vice president of WIN Gallup International, Kancho Stoichev, the outcome of the poll shows that the U.S. policy over the last 20 years has led to a rapprochement between Moscow and Beijing. Russian and Chinese officials have repeatedly said that the bilateral ties have reached a peak in their entire history, noting that the relations are of strategic importance. While the U.S. and its Western allies have been deeply critical of the fact that both Russia and China have had a more closed-door policy, what it likely means is that the West resents that it has been harder to infiltrate those countries, to get them to subvert to Western hegemony and the criminally fraudulent fractional reserve system of banking. During his election campaign, Donald Trump has been critical of the NATO alliance, calling it obsolete, while also vowing to make members pay their fair share. Behind their own borders, Russia and China have been able to work to create the systems, financial strategies, and financial infrastructure that have prepared them for the removal of the U.S. dollar as global reserve currency, something that some believe has already happened, and the ultimate collapse of Western banks due to astronomical debts that can never be paid off. Of course, this poll does not suggest that the countries themselves are aligning politically to the East, but evidence is suggesting that more and more countries are moving this way, and when national elections come in these countries, the people may be more likely than not to elect leaders who indicate a platform of aligning more to the East, and this will continue to have an impact on the unelected EU membership and on NATO as well. In financial news, Greece is back in the financial news, although it is, again, not particularly good news. The so-called good news, if there is any, is that RT was reporting on February 17th that European Union officials are urging Greece and its creditors to strike a financial aid deal for the country quickly to safeguard economic recovery. However, Athens has refused a demand from its creditors for more austerity measures. The Greek government said it would not ask for €1 more from its impoverished citizens. European Commissioner for Economic and Financial Affairs Pierre Moscovici was quoted as saying in the article that an agreement on the way forward for the Greek program is absolutely necessary. With a little effort from all stakeholders, it seems to me doable. For those who do not have English as a first language, doable is a bit of a slang word meaning that it can be done. The article notes that Athens has resisted the imposition of more austerity by the lenders, particularly on such groups as pensioners, who have already seen 11 cuts to their income. With Greece, we are witnessing in real time the strategy of the global cabal of how to destroy a movement, a government, and a country. We saw how the people of Greece rose up in protest against the unelected leadership of the European Union. We saw how one leader, Alexis Tsipras, managed to ignite the wave of anger and rise to power against the odds. After the election, we saw how the EU bankers and leaders came into Greece and began to put pressure on Tsipras, so much so that he was forced to abandon the agenda upon which he was elected by the people. We saw how new bailout deals were arranged and how ever more austerity cuts were imposed upon the people. The bankers, the politicians, and the media have been trying to sell the message that austerity will help restore the economy of the country. But this is just simply not true. Countries forced into bailouts are not given the bailouts to help them recover, but rather to impoverish the citizens more, while the power holders get control of a country through its national services and resources. Michael Hudson, a distinguished professor of economics at the University of Missouri, spoke to Sharmini Piris of the Real News Network. Here is a small part of what he had to share with her.
It's good to be here, but I take issue with one thing that you said. You said the lenders expect Greece to grow. That is not so. There is no way in which the lenders did expect Greece to grow. In fact, the IMF was the main lender. It said that Greece cannot grow under the circumstances that it has now. In fact, what do you do in a case where you make a loan to a country and the entire staff says there is no way this country can repay the loan? That is what the IMF staff said in 2015. It made the loan anyway, not to Greece, but to pay the French banks and the German banks and a few other bondholders. Not a penny of that went to Greece. The junk economics that they used was saying, we have a program to make sure we will help manage the Greek economy, to enable it to repay, and that's austerity. Now, Sharmini, for the last 50 years, every single austerity program that the IMF has made has shrunk the economy. No austerity program has ever helped an economy grow. No budget surplus has ever helped an economy grow because a budget surplus sucks money out of the economy. And the conditionalities, the so-called reforms, are an Orwellian term for anti-reform, for cutting back pensions, for rolling back the progress that the labor movement has made in the last half century. So the lenders knew very well that Greece would not grow, that it would shrink. So the question is, why does this junk economics continue decade after decade? And the reason is the loans are made to Greece precisely because Greece couldn't pay. And when a country can't pay, the rules that the IMF and the EU and the German bankers behind it supported was, well, if you can't pay, don't worry, we will simply insist that you sell off your public domain. Sell off your land, your transportation, your ports, your electric utilities. This was, by now, clearly a program that has gone on and on decade after decade. Now, surprisingly enough, America's ambassador to the EU, Ted Malloch, has gone on Bloomberg and now has gone on Greek TV telling the Greeks, leave the euro and go it alone. You have Trump's nominee for the ambassador to the EU himself saying the EU zone is a dead zone. It's going to shrink, and if you continue to repay the loan, if you do not withdraw from the euro, then you are going to be in a permanent depression, as far as the eye can see. And Greece is a result of the bad loans. Greece has already been in a longer depression today, and a deeper depression than it was in the 1930s.
We are seeing now how the country is unable to meet the debt burdens, and this was done by intentional design, so that foreign cabal-controlled interests could buy up and therefore begin taking control of a country while punishing the people even more. This punishment of Greece and its people is continuing. An RT article from January 18th reported that Greece's national rail company, Train OSE, has been sold to Italy's state railway group, Ferrovie dello Stato, FS, for 45 million euro, or about 48 million US dollars. The sale is part of Greece's 86 billion euro bailout agreed with international creditors 2 years ago. The privatization of state assets is a condition of the bailout deal, though it contradicts Prime Minister Tsipras's pre-election promise to not privatize the country's infrastructure. Athens has agreed to sell the rail operator and other state assets, aiming to earn €5.8 billion by 2018. Had the Greek Prime Minister kept the courage to do when he was elected what Iceland did back in 2008, it is very possible that Greece could have its own currency again and might even be starting to recover at this time, instead of the people still suffering from incredible austerity. The Icelandic people struggled for a few years, but they have begun emerging from swallowing a bitter pill. Had Greece followed that route, the country might just be looking very different today, and perhaps they would not have to sell off national assets to foreign stakeholders on behalf of the global banking cabal. I am struggling to understand why Greece did not originally accept financial aid from either Russia or China instead of the EU. At the time when I reported on all the events in Greece after the election, everything about the deal with Russia seemed much, much better than the deal with the EU. Of course, however, the leadership in the West was still eager to demonize Russia and prevent Russia from having any influence over Greece. It is also very possible that Tsipras was threatened, or his family was threatened. Had Greece gone this route, it is perhaps possible that Tsipras would have been declared a dictator, and the country would have become a Western target for destabilization for not playing the Western game. As it is now, Greece is being stripped away from its own people, and the people of the world are able to plainly see, assuming they are willing to see, the strategy that is used to break down a country and its people to support an agenda of Western hegemony led by the US and Israel and followed closely by the unelected leadership of the EU, backed by the NATO leadership and served faithfully by the Western media cabal. Over to science-related news now. It is getting more and more difficult with each passing month and year to continue separating the topics of science and spirituality. More specifically, I am referring to the part of each human that is defined as consciousness. It is becoming an unavoidable question, and it is ultimately unavoidable because there is no separation between the two, other than the illusion of separation that has been conditioned and socialized into humans worldwide, for the purposes of humanity to learn more about itself through this illusion of separation. In this sense, those souls that we consider to be part of the global cabal have played their roles extremely well, creating a world so dense and dark that it was almost impossible for humanity to wake up in. However, humans worldwide have been doing this, mostly during the last 20 years, but especially during the last 10 years. 20 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 out of every 10 people might have some degree of awakened awareness as to what was really going on in the world. Today, arguably, perhaps 4 to 5 people might have a very informed position, while maybe another 2 or 3 recognize that the world is messed up, although they may not fully understand why. The percentage of people in North America and the Western world who are blindly thinking that the world is still the same, who have absolutely no idea whatsoever about an elitist 1% in the world, may be down to 1 or 2 people out of every 10. There is still the rabbit hole analogy, however. As we start going down this rabbit hole of discovery as to the truth of what is going on, we only discover that there is more and more that we do not know, and thus the journey continues. Philip Ball, writing for the BBC on February 16th, has reintroduced the topic of the link between the human mind and quantum physics. Perhaps it is now time for this conversation to begin entering the mainstream media. The first good news in this article is that there is an acknowledgement of quantum physics as opposed to purely Newtonian physics. This may be a very subtle sign that we are moving beyond a purely three-dimensional awareness into a more fourth and even fifth-dimensional awareness, a space where things that were previously considered not possible now enter the realm of not just possible reality, but even actual reality. The article by Ball is perhaps best for people who prefer to think in more scientific terms and who grasp scientific concepts with ease. And the article will be in the show summary for this story. Also in the show summary will be the video that explains the concept that Ball describes in his article. Ball refers to the double slit experiment, where light is shone first through a single slit, creating a single column of light on the wall behind. However, when a second slit is added, there are not two columns of light, but multiple columns, suggesting that something more mysterious is taking place. The experiment goes on to introduce the concept of observance and how an atom that first acts as a wave of potential suddenly switches to behaving like a particle while under observation. Ball's article begins to introduce the concept that the human brain has the potential to behave like a quantum wave. This is the science behind it. Of course, the spirituality behind it suggests that we are all divine creators, having the ability to take all the waves of potentials and then observe the one potential and manifest it into reality. This may be the simplest way to state it. In other words, we create our own reality according to where we focus our attention, and we align with that which reflects the particular vibration we are putting out. It's more than just the brain, however. This theory exists at the core of our very being, even in our DNA. Lance Shuttler, in an article on the Prepare for Change website on February 4th, writes that one strand of DNA from one single cell contains enough information to clone an entire organism. Obviously, understanding DNA allows us to understand much about life and the universe around us. A deeper understanding of the new science tells us that DNA begins not as a molecule, but as a wave form. Even more interestingly, this wave form exists as a pattern within time and space, and is coded throughout the entire universe. We are surrounded by pulsating waves of invisible genetic information, whose waves create microscopic gravitational forces that pull in atoms and molecules from their surrounding environment to construct DNA. The article adds the following. In 2011, Nobel Prize winner Dr. Luc Montagnier demonstrated that DNA can be spontaneously formed out of merely hydrogen and oxygen. He started out with a hermetically sealed tube of pure sterilized water, and then placed another sealed tube next to it, which had small amounts of DNA floating in water. Montagnier then electrified both tubes with a weak 7 Hz electromagnetic field and waited. 18 hours later, little pieces of DNA had grown in the original tube, which consisted of only pure sterilized water. This new science tells us that the universe is constantly conspiring to make biological life, whenever and wherever it can. In any given area of the universe, these hidden microgravitational waves will begin gathering atoms and molecules together to create DNA, and thus life. This and much more that is coming out at this time has the potential to move humanity infinitely forward in understanding both the scientific and spiritual aspects of our existence. John Hagelin, a scientist in the U.S., appeared in a video called Mind Over Matter, and he offers this.
What is the physics of consciousness? We can ask that question today. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? What are the origins of consciousness? What are the limits of human potential? We're in a position to actually answer that now, I believe, although there's certainly not consensus yet in the scientific community about that. But with the real cutting-edge knowledge, the discovery of the unified field, the so-called superstring field, we now understand that life is fundamentally one. At the basis of all life's diversity, there is unity. At our basis, you and I are one. And that unity at the basis of mind and matter is consciousness, universal consciousness. We have a society with a certain momentum. We have generations of teachers who've gone to teachers' education, or members of teachers' unions that don't always support educational innovation. So it may take a generation, unfortunately, it may take a generation. Now that simple techniques, universal, non-sectarian, scientifically verified techniques exist to gain enlightenment, it still may take a generation before these life-saving technologies to develop consciousness are reintroduced into education.
You said non-sectarian. Does that mean like non-religious? Is that what you mean by that?
The experience of pure consciousness really transcends any one religion or any one philosophy. It's as scientific as it is religious. It is, after all, a state of functioning of the brain, maximally expanded comprehension. It's the direct subjective experience of the scientifically discovered unified field of all the laws of nature. Is that religious? Perhaps, but it's scientific too. So there's no reason that it should be disbarred from education. Otherwise, we're going to get the same old result. 5% development of our mental potential, another generation of war and terrorism and human cruelty. And that'll go on forever until the experience of life's essential unity is bestowed and the brain is properly developed.
Scientist, spiritualist, and author Greg Braden explores the nature of our connectedness to a unified field, what some people call the oneness.
When a certain number of people come together and they choose in a moment of time to create a precise emotion in their hearts, that emotion literally can intentionally influence the very fields that sustain the life on planet Earth. These fields are now implicated in everything from the immune response of humans throughout the planet, climate, weather patterns, cycles of war and peace, our ability to solve problems, our cognitive abilities. All of these, as different as they sound from one another, are all linked to our relationship to the magnetic fields of the Earth. So what makes this so beautiful is every human on the planet is linked to the field. But not every human on the planet has to be consciously aware of their relationship to benefit from what a relatively few number of people come to understand. And the bottom line is this, is that when we choose to feel feelings that create what is called coherence in our bodies. Coherence is the language, the quality of the language between our heart and our brain. Certain kinds of heart-based experiences, such as appreciation, gratitude, forgiveness, care, compassion, those are the ancient understandings that have always been taught in the truest traditions of our past, and now our own science is finding that those same traditions are now documenting this very real effect in our hearts. When we can feel those feelings in our bodies, they're mirrored in the field, and everyone benefits from the experience of relativity.
Then there is perhaps a more humorous approach to this wild and wacky subject, as explained by Russell Brand to an Australian broadcaster, and this was also in the Mind Over Matter video.
Being funny, you want to be better than everybody else, you want to be the best, the funniest.
You cannot define yourself in reference to other external coordinates. You must define yourself internally with your relationship with a higher entity. Think of yourself as a manifestation of some higher thing, some higher frequency. This is the visible realization. And you know that because you can't see atoms, can you? And you certainly can't see the forces that hold atoms together. There, in the micro-quantum world, Richard, lie the answers to everything. We can't understand it without logical, rational minds, but we feel it intuitively. Get yourself in alignment with that stuff and you beam like the sun.
Jeepers creepers.
Yeah, man.
So it is a topic that will only continue to be explored, discussed, shared, dissected, rejected, accepted, and perhaps shared again. What makes it exciting is that science is finally starting to recognize publicly and acknowledge this information, which gives it greater legitimacy, at least in the minds of potential critics or those who require a more scientific basis for the purposes of accepting new information. It is another piece of the mysterious puzzle of what life is in physical form, whether or not one accepts that there is a matrix or hologram or some other kind of divinely created reality of which we are all a part. Finally, in health-related news, I am completely amazed at the number of articles that are now crossing my path that are related to cannabis and hemp and the benefits that this plant offers. 2 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 articles a month might cross my path. Last year, perhaps 5 to 10 articles in a month would appear on my news feeds. In the last 3 weeks alone, I have been seeing between 10 to 15 articles each week, and this week it is the same. People are beginning to become more informed about the benefits, but also the dangers of how Big Pharma is attempting to position themselves to benefit from this new health wave, but have no intention of offering a product that will truly be beneficial for humanity. Let's take a look at some of what has been revealed this week. An article that relates to the previous story of science and consciousness, but also connected to cannabis, appeared on the sensiseeds.com website. This article explores what happens in the pineal gland when cannabis is used. According to this article, the pineal gland, the mythical seat of spirituality and consciousness, the site of the primordial third eye, has been of fascination to humanity since its function and importance were discovered. It is well known that the pineal gland responds to psychoactive drugs, so what happens when we use cannabis? The article adds that the gland is one among many that comprise the endocrine system in vertebrate animal species, whose function is heavily involved in the regulation of the circadian or daily rhythm and the production of hormones, the most important of which is being melatonin, the sleep hormone. The article also adds that the idea of the pineal gland being a primordial third eye has some basis in fact. The gland is made up of cells known as pinealocytes, which in some non-mammal vertebrate species actually directly respond to light. This ability makes them very similar to the cells of the retina, the part of the eye that receives light from the lens opening. There are videos on YouTube of people doing amazing things while blindfolded. In China and other countries, children are shown riding bicycles and doing other activities with their eyes covered. The third eye appears to be capable not only of vision, but also 360-degree vision, a concept that most people will have difficulty grasping. The article is a bit long, and it is hard to summarize the value in this article in just a few short paragraphs. The pineal gland, however, is recognized as a gland that is vital for spiritual awakening, and the article explores how cannabis can contribute not just to pineal gland health, but to general health and also to spiritual awakening. It has been stated that the fluoridation of water has been a trick by the global cabal to dumb down the general population because fluoride attaches to the pineal gland and calcifies it, thus preventing people from awakening to the higher experiences that would lift people beyond their current enslavement to the cabal power. It is this process that is also linked to Alzheimer's disease. Christina Sarek, writing for naturalsociety.com, shares the following. Alzheimer's disease is running rampant throughout the modern world now, but even with pharmaceutical companies spending billions on drugs to quote-unquote cure it, they have failed miserably. While the use of coconut oil for Alzheimer's disease is proving beyond beneficial, the answer to really treating this disease may lie in the pineal gland and the decalcification of one of the most important elements in the endocrine system. Sarek adds that a new study looks at intracranial calcifications in the brains of Alzheimer's patients after noticing that the brain's primary structures were negatively affected by calcification, namely the pineal gland, habenula, Chlorides plexus, superior sagittal sinus, basal ganglia, falx, dura mater, and tentorium cerebelli, as well as the petroclinoid ligaments, a promising new hypothesis was formed. Removing calcification from the brain could treat the disease. Alzheimer's patients had highly calcified pineal glands, as do 2/3 of the adult population, and a likely cause of this calcification is fluoride. Related to this are the concerns expressed by people who are not familiar with the benefits of cannabis, that cannabis can negatively impact health. Compared to cigarettes, this is not so. One article from the Cannabis.net website on February 13th reported on a study done in New Zealand of regular users of cannabis between the ages of 18 to 38 to determine the long-term effects of cannabis use. The article reported that the results of the study found that while 20 years of smoking doobs was indeed associated with poorer periodontal health, or gum health, at age 38, smoking weed was unrelated to other physical health problems, and the subjects who smoked their whole life were no more unhealthy than those who did not smoke. In comparing cannabis to cigarettes, the article added the following. While it's no secret at all that tobacco is an extremely vile, addictive, and lethal product, directly responsible for a worldwide tally of 6 million deaths per year and a who's who list of smoking-related illnesses to boot, a widely underreported fact about tobacco is its propensity to cause a thinning of the brain's cortex. What exactly does that mean? Well, being that the cortex is where important thought processes such as memory, language, and perception occur, essentially it means that smoking tobacco leads to a decline in mental health. This, of course, does not mean that it will be this way for everyone, as everyone reacts differently to different products, both healthy and unhealthy. Another article, however, offers the guidance that cannabis may be able to help people kick the nicotine habit. An article on the I Read Culture blog site on February 14th reports that Canada recently concluded a study on the benefits of medical cannabis and found that the plant was not only effective in pain management, but that it also helped with addiction to more harmful vices. The article goes on to add that the study found that cannabis use can diminish a user's dependency on tobacco, alcohol, and other dangerous drugs like painkillers. The research is one of the first major studies to make the connection between cannabis and substance addiction. The study asserts that cannabis can help you get off drugs and is not the gateway drug that it has been described as for years. There is an interesting part to this article, and it comes in the final paragraph. Arguably, the most troubling part of the study found that 42% of those questioned had to obtain their cannabis through illegal or unregulated sources. This creates not only an unsafe scenario for the patients, but also a tax revenue loss for Canada. The country is spending millions of dollars a year fighting a problem that can generate billions of dollars for them. As the stigma of cannabis falls away, hopefully someone will decide that either the social or financial benefits of cannabis greatly outweighs any supposed negative byproducts. There is a big problem with this, in my opinion, and it is a problem that has impacted me personally, involving my mother. The article reports that it is troubling that people had to resort to getting their cannabis illegally. In other words, from sources not approved nor controlled by the government, big pharma, or any other cabal-linked source that does not want to create a healthy, empowered population. Recently in Canada, at least one so-called approved cannabis source was found to be dispensing contaminated cannabis oil that had fungicide in it. Fungicide is only used in conditions where humidity may result in the growth of mold. In the proper environment and conditions, this would not be necessary. My mother spent a number of days in the hospital, and it is believed to be linked to this cannabis oil. These days, the only way to ensure a healthy product is for people to grow their own cannabis, so they know what is or is not in it, and they can therefore take control of their own health instead of trusting institutions whose profits depend upon keeping people sick. This week, there are also several articles reporting on how cannabis is curing conditions that some doctors claim are incurable, such as stomach and bowel diseases. As well, there is an article reporting on the benefits for the treatment of leaky gut syndrome and various autoimmune disorders as well. On a more positive side, however, was one article by Robin Griggs-Lawrence on the hightimes.com website asking the question if cannabis chocolate is the ultimate thing to eat. The article writes that cacao beans have been revered since ancient times as food and medicine, considered an aphrodisiac due to the presence of tryptophan, a serotonin booster, and phenylethylamine, a stimulant related to amphetamine. Many chefs and scientists believe chocolate and cannabis are an ideal pairing, not only because chocolate masks the hashy flavor, but also because the two share chemical cousins, THC and anandamide, which affect appetite, mood, and pain reception. THC, probably the most famous molecule in cannabis, fits into cannabinoid receptors in the human body, causing psychoactive and medical effects. Anandamide, a lipid found in chocolate and also produced in the human brain, is nearly chemically identical to THC and brings on a very mild, some say imperceptible high. When THC and anandamide double team, scientists believe they could inhibit the breakdown of the cannabinoids, THC and CBD, causing them to stay in the system longer and enhancing their benefits. What this means is most people get higher and stay high longer when they combine cannabis and chocolate. That's one reason, perhaps, why the pot brownie has endured. Another article of particular value to women appeared on the internationalhighlife.com website. In this article, Karen Wagner was reported to have developed a particular strain of cannabis that contains slightly less than the normal levels of THC, a strain that promotes orgasms in women and a better experience of sex because the woman is not as high. The product is called Sex Pot, and unfortunately, it is currently only available in San Francisco, although Wagner is expecting room for expansion in the future. For those who may not yet be ready to try cannabis, however, but are wanting to explore other possible options for the treatment of cancer, I will include a link to a story on the cancertutor.com website reporting on the use of baking soda over a period of several weeks to help alkalize the body so that cancer can no longer exist. Another article in the summary will look at other non-marijuana plants that also contain cannabinoids. Once again, I will include all the links from the past 2 weeks in the show summary so people can have access to all the information from one page to offer to friends and family who are beginning to research the value of cannabis. Just before ending with my final words, I have a somewhat urgent request to make. Obviously, as many of you may have noticed, I was able to record a newscast last week, and I am able to record this week. My circumstances have not changed, however. There are still challenges from my present location. I apologize that everything has been so chaotic with the newscast. The truth of the last month or two has been this. It was my expectation that this month I would be starting some kind of a new job with a friend's new company. I was brought to a location in Europe where I believed a project would be starting and where I could finally earn an income that would allow me to get my own apartment and a place to live with my own energies. Something has changed, however, and it seems I am no longer a part of the plan for this new company. As many of you know and are feeling, the energies are shifting rapidly, and it is affecting different people in different ways, and this includes myself. I was given some assurances that have not been delivered upon, and although this is sad and unfortunate, I am trusting that there is a reason why this has not worked out either. At this time, I am searching around for a possible job to allow me to stay at my present location in Slovenia. After 5 years of doing CVN, I realize that I may now have to do some things that I really have not wanted to do. If I am able to find or create some work to help provide an income, I may have to consider charging a fee to listen to CVN or to have commercials put into the newscast to raise some funds. Until now, I have resisted this because I wanted the newscast to be freely available to all, since I feel the message is more important than the income. However, the fact is, while our world is still currently in this economic paradigm, I now have to make a choice to either get another job, which may or may not allow me to continue with CVN, or to make a way to find a way to generate enough income to support me so that I can continue doing this for humanity and the planet. If there are CVN listeners in Europe who have groups of people that may be interested in hearing anything I have to say, I am open to having workshops, presentations, discussion groups, or even English language tutoring. I am open to proofreading the English pages of websites, and I can also do voice work for people or companies wanting to promote themselves or their businesses in English. As I am currently in Europe, it is easier for me to travel to locations to meet people, so if anyone has ideas or connections to people or to companies that may benefit from the skills I am able to offer, I would appreciate people reaching out to their contacts and their friends or those companies to see if they could use help from me. It could be an Asian company as well. In the meantime, unfortunately, since this job has not worked out, I'm going to have to reach out to listeners to do another fundraising call. In an ideal world, it would be nice to find 600 or 700 people willing to share $2 or $3 or €2 or €3 each month. This would allow me to get an apartment somewhere and begin purchasing equipment that would allow me to improve CVN, or perhaps even begin to move CVN towards a video newscast. However, this cannot happen without a job or without support from all of you. People have told me that I need to place a higher value on my service. People have a tendency to not value that which is freely given. In some cases, I agree. I have given financial help to others that has not been returned to me in my time of need. I want to be able to help people, but I can no longer choose to do this in this immediate moment. There are thousands of people who listen to CVN and who claim how much they value this service. Yet over the entire 5 years CVN has been on the air, many have contributed nothing. Of course, I honor this choice, and I do know that many of you are just unable to find the financial resources at this time. But at the same time, I do have to ask people that if one values this service so much and you are in a position to be able to contribute, why cannot some people find something, anything that supports me in offering this service to you? I realize those words may sound like I am angry. No, I am not. I do not wish to judge anyone for choices. At the same time, I have to start valuing myself and this service. I believe it is a valuable service, and many of you have written and posted messages about how valuable you believe this service to be. I do admit, however, that I am feeling a little frustrated. If the service was not valuable, I would have stopped a few years ago. Is this service still valuable to people? Has CVN finished its role? I am willing to keep going, but I am no longer sure if people really want this service to continue. I am asking for assistance at this time so I can begin to get my life settled in some way instead of hanging in limbo wherever I happen to be. For the 5 or 6 people who have been making regular monthly contributions, this does not apply to you. It also does not apply to the few people who have made significant one-time contributions over the years. Please know, however, I am extremely grateful for all your support, whether it is financial, whether it is just listening to the newscast, whether it is sharing the newscast. It all does help me in every way. I am, however, reaching out to those who have never contributed and yet have the resources to do so. It is my hope that these people may choose to give some thought to helping support this service. I will repost the details in the show summary to contribute by PayPal, but if PayPal is not an option, then please contact me with any other suggestion, such as TransferWise, and I will explore setting up the necessary accounts to receive this support. Thank you, as always, for your understanding, your patience, but more importantly, your continued support. In this week's final words, I spoke last week at the end of the newscast about the irony of the times in which we are now living. When we sit back and really start taking a look at things, one may begin to see how we are given the illusion of choice. But at the end of the day, one is still making the elites wealthy with the things he or she buys. One is still serving the same masters, regardless of who she or he votes for. And one is still consuming the same message, regardless of which mainstream media outlet he or she chooses to listen to. The mainstream media have been selling the strengths of the EU, even as the manufactured refugee crisis and the manufactured Islamophobia threaten to tear it apart. This, of course, is to justify the spending for NATO so they can prevent their demise and continue their aggressive anti-Russian stance. This week, Nigel Farage stood up and spoke to a number of these issues in the EU Parliament.
Do I feel like I'm attending a meeting of a religious sect here this morning? It's as if the global revolution of 2016, Brexit, Trump, the Italian rejection in the referendum has completely bypassed you. You can't face up to the fact that this bandwagon is going to roll across Europe in these elections in 2017. A lot of citizens now recognise this form of centralised government simply doesn't work. Whether it's the miseries inflicted upon a country like Greece by the euro, the unemployment caused by bad regulation, or the feeling that none of us are as safe in our cities because of the disastrous common asylum policy. But at the heart of it is a fundamental point. Mr Verhofstadt this morning said the people want more Europe. They don't. The people want less Europe. And we see this again and again when people have referendums and they reject aspects of EU membership. But something more fundamental is going on out there. Yes, you can say they're lying, and I've no doubt that many of you here, when you hear what I'm about to say, will probably despise your own voters. Because just last week, Chatham House, the reputable group, published a massive survey from 10 European member states, and only 20% of people want immigration from Muslim countries to continue. Just 20% want us to keep on allowing people in from Muslim countries, which means your voters have a harder line position on this than Donald Trump or myself or frankly any party sitting in this Parliament. And that is where we're going. And I simply cannot believe that you're blind to the fact that even Mrs Merkel has now made a U-turn and wants to send people back. Even Mr Schulz thinks that it's a good idea. The fact is, the European Union has no future at all in its current form, and I suspect you're in for as big a shock in 2017 as you were in 16.
This video was also posted on an article on the zerohedge.com website. The author of the article added the following regarding the upcoming French presidential election. Le Pen supporters are from the same socioeconomic class as Trump supporters and Brexit supporters. The article includes some information allegedly from Euro-intelligence sources, and at one point it was reported that the most telling feature, in our view, is that the more educated people are more likely to vote for Macron, and the less educated go for Marine Le Pen. Education may be one theme that contributes to the separation of humanity on so many levels. Education has always been used as a national tool for indoctrination to get their young citizens socialized into a way of thinking that supports the national identity and the national history that those in control are seeking to brainwash them into. In this case, education, backed up by the power of social media and the mainstream media, has been turned into a tool that is marketed as a status symbol, worthy of recognition, but only among those who share a similar status. If I use my education as an example, as other listeners have heard me mention from time to time, I could, for example, be critical of the media because of my degree in radio and television. Without that degree, my comments would be brushed off as uninformed. As well, now that I have a master's degree from a so-called recognized educational institution for peace, I am able to be critical of the work and messages for global peace, even though the institution that educated me was hoping that I would fall into line like a good little brainwashed sheep and accept a good job promoting the business of peace, like so many of my former classmates, instead of rebelling with a message of a more real and holistic global peace which threatens the current global agenda. However, it is because of my status as a postgraduate that my words will carry more weight in any argument or discussion with an academic, because I have studied the same or almost the same level as that academic. The Zero Hedge article notes that it is the so-called educated that are voting for Macron, while the so-called uneducated are voting for Le Pen, and that it was similar in the U.S. in the voters between Clinton and Trump. Please do not misinterpret what I am about to say, because the issue really is much more complicated than merely education. There are other factors in play also, which I will not go into at this time. There are those people, perhaps people like me, who played the education game and somehow managed to find the strength to overcome the brainwashing. There are the so-called uneducated who, for whatever reason, were unable to receive education or who chose to avoid it altogether. Humans are made to feel that their thoughts, opinions, and contributions are less than meaningful if they have not earned the right to share them among the so-called educated class. In the past, these lines between different groups of people were much easier to see and interpret. Today, it is much more complicated. Every issue is tied directly into another issue, and both of those are tied into a third issue. And possibly those three issues are then somehow connected to a fourth issue. Our world has mostly been socialized into focusing on only the one single issue, or possibly the first two issues, without being able to critically think for ourselves in connecting the first two issues with anything beyond those two issues. It is possibly for this reason that the media is to successfully manipulate the general population in terms of rejecting refugees generally, or rejecting Muslims generally, without connecting these issues to the deeper agenda of Western hegemony and the continued enslavement of all people based on their blind assumptions to only the singular issue or two issues. Transcending this means much more than merely becoming aware that the refugee or Muslim issues are tools for our separation, fear, and control. It also means being able to see into the root sources of these issues and why these issues, along with so many others, are being played out in the most fearful, controlling, and negative ways. Only in connecting these dots can humanity begin to step back and stop giving power to the people and institutions that are attempting to push our emotional buttons and try to get as much of the population as possible whipped up into a frenzy of rebellion. This rebellion would, of course, then allow humanity's enslavers to justify the activation and mobilization of militarized police forces or the military against the people, while being paid for by the taxpayers themselves. So many are not yet able or willing to see how we are being trained and baited while paying not only everything that makes the rich richer, but also that makes the poor poorer through taxation. My education allows me the privilege of being critical of the so-called educated class. However, many fell victim to the brainwashing. Many so-called uneducated people fell victim to the brainwashing of the media and the elitists, while other so-called uneducated people were able to break through and use their own critical thinking to advance their lives forward in whatever meaningful ways they were able. There is no right, wrong, good, or bad here. It is not our place to judge another, and it is also for this reason I gently ask listeners to consider carefully their choices to engage any social media interactions that may be baiting people or setting up others in possibly negative ways. We do not know the full bigger picture, and we certainly do not know the full bigger picture. Creating global peace is going to require each and every one of us, myself included, perhaps myself especially, to be more aware of what we are saying, thinking, doing, and engaging. Does a spider whose web is destroyed actively plan revenge? Probably not. It just goes back, moves on, and makes a new web. It focuses on what it needs to do for its own existence and survival. In these energetic times of change, I might argue that we are all being challenged to think and focus in the same way, instead of allowing ourselves to get drawn into engagements that only empower the elitists and the cabal against us. I would like to create that we can do better than this. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. So that is the sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary available on the website. CVN can be followed through its Facebook page, Minds.com page, YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that a true friend knows your weaknesses, but shows you your strengths, feels your fears, but fortifies your faith, sees your anxieties, but frees your spirit, recognizes your disabilities, but emphasizes your possibilities. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.